It started as a pause, not a dramatic one, not the kind that draws attention or signals importance, just a brief moment of waiting, the kind that feels harmless, the kind you assume will pass on its own. I didn't notice it at first. Pauses happen all the time, between sentences, between thoughts, between one moment and the next. This one felt no different. I assumed it would end, the way pauses usually do, quietly, without needing to be acknowledged. But it didn't. The pause stayed. At first, it still felt temporary, like something unfinished rather than absent. I told myself I was giving the moment space, that waiting was intentional, that there was no need to rush into words. The room continued as it always had. People spoke. Movement filled the space. Nothing suggested that the pause mattered, and that made it easy to let it continue. Time moved forward, but the pause didn't move with it. It remained where it was, stretching just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to feel wrong. I stayed still within it, expecting it to resolve itself. Pauses usually do. They end when someone speaks, when a thought lands, when the moment finds its direction. This one didn't. Instead, the room adjusted, not abruptly, not deliberately. Conversation found its rhythm again, stepping around the silence without resistance. Words flowed easily between others, finding places that no longer included me. The pause didn't interrupt the moment. It simply stopped being part of it. I realized then that pauses don't always announce when they've overstayed. Sometimes they fade into the background, becoming part of the structure rather than the space between. I was still there, listening, watching, but the pause had changed. It was no longer waiting for something to happen. It had settled. I noticed how natural it felt, for the conversation to continue without acknowledging it. No one looked toward the silence. No one waited for it to end. The moment had already moved on, and yet the pause remained. Not in the room, in me. I told myself it was fine, that not every pause needs to be filled, that silence can be a form of understanding. And for a while, that explanation worked. The pause felt controlled, measured, almost thoughtful. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like restraint. But restraint depends on timing, and timing had already passed. The longer the pause stayed, the more difficult it became to leave it. Speaking now would have required explanation, not of what I wanted to say, but of why I hadn't said anything before. That wasn't the beginning I wanted. So the pause remained. At some point, it stopped feeling like a pause at all. It became a condition, a state I was inside, rather than a moment I was moving through. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was delayed. The room didn't resist this change. It adapted. Conversations continued. Decisions were made. Moments passed. Everything functioned. And because everything worked, the pause became invisible. That was the part I didn't expect. Not that the pause would last, but that nothing would mark its end. There was no signal that it was time to speak. No opening left behind. The moment no longer expected resolution. It had already reorganized itself around the absence of sound. I wondered when the pause had crossed that line, when it stopped being temporary and started being permanent. There was no clear answer. It hadn't happened all at once. It had happened gradually, the way habits form, quietly, without resistance. The pause didn't end, because nothing challenged it, and the longer it stayed, the more natural it felt. I realized then that pauses don't always end with words. Sometimes they end with acceptance, not acceptance from others, but from the moment itself. The world learns how to move forward, without waiting, and once that happens, the pause no longer belongs to you. It becomes part of the past, without ever having been resolved. I don't know what would have happened if I had spoken earlier, if I had interrupted the pause, before it settled into something permanent. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have. There's no way to know. The pause didn't leave evidence behind. It didn't announce its ending, because it never ended. It simply stretched itself across time, until it became indistinguishable from silence. The pause that never ended wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't demand attention. It just stayed. And by the time I realized, it had become something else. The moment no longer needed it to end. The world had already learned how to continue without it.